Hello and welcome to It's All Kicking Off, another football roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, Ewan Patterson, and Adam Clery here to discuss another burning football issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from for daily football podcast. And make sure you follow at What Culture FC on Twitter. But gents, we are gathered here today to talk all about Manchester United.
I just think it's really funny that you called this a burning issue while it's 26 degrees outside. So
yeah, I've been joined by a Liverpool fan,
hello,
a Newcastle fan,
hello,
and me, a Chesterfield fan who supported Man United when I was 8.
No, actual mention the real thing about this before. We said this quite difficult to do a Man United one because we must be the only workplace in the United Kingdom that hasn't got one Man United fan. To which Adam Wilbourn said, "Yeah, they're like rats, aren't they?" And I went, "You literally married a Man United fan."
Yeah. Moving on.
Utopian workspaces do exist.
Yeah. You and Patterson, I sense you are rubbing your hands about discussing this issue. What are your predictions for Man United this season? Taking your Liverpool bias slightly out of it.
Taking it out of the equation slightly, I find it interesting whether or not I can't get reading the Man United fan base. I can't tell whether they're really optimistic about the what's to come or very, kind of dejected and despondent still because they signed Wan-Bissaka, a fantastic talent, fantastic up-and-coming talent. They got Daniel James, again, a very nice young player. They kind of need that passion, I guess, because if you watch the Man United sides the past few years, they just look like they don't give a single crap, basically. I still think this is going to be not a season of regression, but maybe a season of consolidating where they are. Maybe I don't think they should be expecting anything massive. And the interesting things that you hear in the press when they keep on getting linked with every single player on the planet, and then I don't know. It seems like the club still isn't there, if you know what I mean.
It's fascinating, when you hear them talk on the radio or whatever about the future, there's so many differing views. There's some people saying, we should be promoting all the youth from our youth squad like Fergie did in the good old days, etc., etc. We shouldn't be throwing money at players because look at what happened with Sanchez. And then there's the people who, are looking at it saying, we've got a selection of good players. We just haven't necessarily got a 1 to 11 of a great squad. But I don't think anyone can actually pin down what their expectations are this season.
Well, I think as much as pinning down the expectations, I think a lot of people have been trying to pin down the problem at Man United for the last couple of years because they've certainly had the ambition of all the clubs around them. They've certainly spent comparative to your Liverpools and your Man Cities and your Chelseas and everything like that, but yet they've fallen way, way off the pace. And I think the problem is it's Ed Woodward, isn't it? Like the amount of money he's thrown around on things that just haven't really worked. Lukaku's not been a bad signing, I don't think, but he's not been... The level of responsibility on his shoulders was literally to score 35, 40 goals a season and drag them up the league. Realistically, he was never going to do that. Pogba's come in. He's, again, not somebody who I think gets full credit for how good they actually are. But again, he's not been this linchpin in centre midfield. He's not been this best player in the Premier League that they wanted him to be. Sanchez has come in. He's not been Alexis Sanchez, was the bottom line with that.
Played the piano once.
Yeah. And it's not really worked. And I get that they're trying to change their approach this season. They're not going for these hugely expensive established stars who are coming here maybe for a payday or going to have all this expectation put on their shoulders. They want to help develop Wan-Bissaka. They want to develop your Daniel James. There's a reason they're getting linked with Sean Longstaff at Newcastle as well because he's another one who's got good raw potential, could potentially go on and be a Man United caliber player. But I still think all the problems are still there. Like Wan-Bissaka is the best example because they wanted him. He was an exciting buy. They didn't need a right back.
No.
The problems last season weren't at right back. And in Diego Dallo, they've already got a young player they can develop in that position. Daniel James, he's come from the Championship. Even if he is going to be, let's say, the next Ryan Giggs or something, how many years away is that? You can't expect him to get 10, 15, 20 goals this season. And again, with Longstaff, he's only played a handful of senior games for Newcastle, where he looked very good, but in a squad that Rafa had sort of assembled specifically to help get the most out of a lot of, not weak links, but certainly limited players. Longstaff's responsibility at Newcastle was never anything more than just, when you get the ball, make sure where it goes is better than where you were. Even if it's 2 or 3 yards away, that's fine. And his range of passing's excellent, and he gets around the pitch quite well, but he's not... he's not an N'Golo Kante, for example, and he's not a Frank Lampard type figure. He's a very tidy, competent centre midfielder. he's a Michael Carrick, effectively.
Yes.
But he's not Michael Carrick, is the problem. And I look at what they're doing this year, and it smacks of maybe Arsenal a couple of years ago, where they're going to kind of have to tread water just on the cusp of the top four. Maybe if a few teams drop off, they could potentially break in there. Maybe they have a really good run, sort of like they did when Solskjaer first came in. They could get in there, but by and large, you're looking at them for 5th or 6th, realistically, unless, of course, they go out and spend loads more money. But that is the problem in the first place.
Yeah, before we get more and more into this squad of theirs, I want to talk about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because you mentioned there was that golden period for a while. I distinctly remember that interview that Gary Neville did where he said,
where do you want your statue?
Where do you want your statue? How much do you want to get paid? And how long do you want the contract to be? That was amidst all the stuff with obviously the Champions League victory over PSG and the turnaround in the league. And then the wheels completely fell off. And, you know, the anticipation for this season is not like, well, here we go, full season for Solskjaer. I feel like the knives may already be out for him a little bit. Will Solskjaer last the season for you? Because they've had this... Because they've had this ongoing revolving door of managers, and the only really man they've managed to settle on was Mourinho for a brief period, and that was tempered, let's say.
Yeah. The weird thing about Solskjaer's appointment last season was like, I remember seeing that when Mourinho got sacked, and I was like, they leaked the Solskjaer announcement. I was like, really? Really?
I remember that. On loan from Mould?
Cardiff and Mould. And I was like, well, okay, maybe they're kind of doing what we did a few years back when we had Roy Hodgson in, and then we got Kenny Dalglish to come back and do a serviceable job, but not necessarily the job of the modern game, if you know what I mean. And
keep it ticking over.
Yes, and Solskjaer, talking about, they play in the United way and all that, and I'm like, what is the United way? Can you quantify the United way? And yeah, going towards the end of the season whether or not he's going to be able to like sustain that, I have no idea. Would you make the position of the club even more untenable if you were to basically let him go after you've given him the summer to build this squad? Do you want to give him a full season to see what he can do, trying a different approach? Because like you mentioned earlier on, they've kind of gone the whole signing superstars route for the past 5 years, the likes of your Falcaos and your Di Marias, and then obviously those moves didn't work out. So, maybe they do need to invest in a long-term project, but whether or not he's competent enough to do that remains to be seen. So.
It's difficult to invest in a long-term project if you're a top four side, because the gulf in how you can operate the club financially
and the players you can attract.
Yeah, between finishing 4th and 5th it's like nothing else in football, realistically. Like, it's all well good you can have a long-term project. Burnley are a great example because they had a long-term project a few years ago with Sean Dyche, and it didn't even matter that they got relegated. They were still happy to commit to that project. They knew sort of financially how they wanted to manage it. If you got them up, brilliant, cash windfall. If they went down, that's fine, they'll deal with it. And now they sort of established themselves up until sort of the last year or so as a really stable Premier League club, and that was their long-term project. But if you're a club that has aspirations of the top four, I think realistically the only two you can guarantee will finish there this season probably Liverpool and City. I think even Spurs could be slightly, depending on how their thing goes. The other two places are pretty much up for grabs. If you are the 3rd or 4th team in the league and your long-term project is to establish yourself in the top 4, great, you can probably do that next season as well. But the margins are tiny.
Plus, the difficulty, I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this from a few seasons ago at least, the difficulty you have is the board and the money men and what have you are desperate to get in the Champions League spots, desperate to get as high as they possibly can in the Premier League. But as a fan, you'd take dropping out of the top 4 potentially for a cup win.
Yes. The most frustrating thing, I think, is that players these days, they desperately want to play Champions League football. Not that that was never the case beforehand, but I remember seasons gone by, we'd be linked with the likes, your Mario Götzes and whatever, and because we weren't playing in Europe, that was effectively impossible. It was only when we finished in the top 4 that we were able to attract, Mohamed Salah. Then, we got to the Champions League final and we signed Fabinho. Keita came in because of the project that Klopp was building and stuff. So European football is a big deal, and not just because of the money, the TV issue, and the amount of money that kind of UEFA give out, but because players do find that really attractive, which is why I'm kind of interested when you see people like we see United being linked with the likes of Nicolas Pepe from Lille or Bruno Fernandes from Sporting, who definitely want to be playing in the Champions League. Can United still attract that caliber of player outside of Europe?
Yeah, I mean, does the legacy of the club count for anything nowadays?
Not as much as I think we as fans would like it to. I think if you're a Man United fan, you want people to want to pull on that shirt because it means so much to you as a fan. The same goes for absolutely any club. But realistically, the fortunes of football teams change all the time. And I think footballers, by and large, or certainly their agents anyway, are smart enough to realise that. And, if you've got a client and the offers are on the table between a team that's playing in the Champions League and has got a good chance of going on a bit of a run in it, and teams that are going to play in the Europa League and the League Cup and, these competitions that aren't broadcast as globally in front of as many people, you tell them, realistically, for the sake of your career, I can get you better deals, I can get you better opportunities, I can put you in front of better situations if you are a Champions League footballer. And unfortunately, as much as you might like this club or how good they might have been when you were growing up, they're not in that competition. They're not part of the conversation.
I was before we go ahead, I was thinking that's the interesting thing with the signing of the young players. Players who are passionate about playing for Man United. And I think there was definitely an issue, maybe for the last 2 seasons, where both. Most Man United squad players, they didn't understand the situation that we were in. You're playing for Manchester United, probably the biggest club in England, one of the biggest clubs ever, and they just didn't show any passion, any drive. So you bring in a Daniel James from the Championship, he's definitely going to appreciate the opportunity.
If you look at the age of let's take your Longstaffs, your Wan-Bissakas, and your Daniel Jameses, they grew up and Man United were the biggest club in the world. It was the most exciting team. Whether or not you supported them, I won't count for Longstaff because you don't sign for Man United if you're from Newcastle. That's simply all there is to it. Michael Carrick. But them growing up, that's a big deal to them. And I think if you sort of maybe lower your expectations, I mean, Wan-Bissaka and Daniel James, all the will in the world at the start of last season, weren't thinking I should be in the Champions League next year, were they? They were just wanting to get themselves established at Crystal Palace and Swansea, which is, with all due respect to both those clubs, a million miles away from that level of football. But now they're playing for Man United, and they're thinking, not only am I at this club where it's beyond my wildest dreams to even play for 12 months ago, but I could help get them into the Champions League, and I will then be in the Champions League as well. So I can see why they're going for with this strategy. They've got a manager who clearly understands the values of the club, which, again, it's a cliche that gets throws around. He understands the club. But he does. He understands what it means to play there. He understands where it should be, or at least where it thinks it should be in the pecking order of football.
Yeah, the mind immediately links to David Moyes saying, "Oh no, I think Man City are probably a better club than us."
Yeah, you just don't do it.
You don't say it.
And again, even Solskjaer's that level, the same level of player that this is. Somebody who has seen Man United as a huge step up and wants to really do something there. Mourinho has managed bigger clubs than Man United when he went there. Not even just in the current pecking order. Historically, Real Madrid are a bigger club than Man United, the biggest club in the world. Real Madrid. He's managed there. He's won titles at Chelsea. He's done everything in the game, pretty much. So Man United it was another job for him. Not saying he didn't want to succeed there, but it's just, it wasn't the end of the world if he didn't. Whereas, you take Solskjaer from Mould, who's managed Cardiff into relegation in the Premier League, and go, do you want to be a success at Manchester United? That's your life. That is your career. That is everything you've ever wanted out of this sport. And the same's true for the players they're buying now. So I can understand the strategy. I think it's good from a fan's perspective. You want people who are going to be bothered, who understand, who share your aspirations for the club. But football's not as romantic as that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm going to reach into my big box of football cliches and say you want your players to play for the badge on the front of the shirt, not for the name on the back of it, and move on to talk about Paul Pogba.
I thought you were going to move on to talk about how funny the badge is this year, as it's the European Cup win. After they're not actually in the Champions League.
Can they keep?
You got to laugh, Man United fans, haven't you?
Times like this, all you can do is laugh
because they've got to design this a good couple of months in advance. So I'll be fine. We'll probably be in the Champions League. And then no.
That's about they've got. Allegedly, I read somewhere they've got Solskjaer and Sheringham and the times they scored in the Champions League
on
final.
the sleeves.
The sleeves.
Yeah.
No pressure then, boys. Just a squad that won the treble. So can they keep Paul Pogba, and should they keep Paul Pogba?
I don't think they should. And this is I think that, I'm sick of this debate as well. It's weird. I'm not even a fan. It's one of those things where Paul Pogba is, I think we can all agree, he's an amazing player.
He's an amazing footballer.
Yeah. Technically one of the best players in the game. I just don't think he serves that team well. And maybe he could, depending on how Solskjaer wants to play. When he went on that great run of form, Pogba was, one of the highest scoring midfielders in the league.
Crucial.
He was really, really good. I think if United got a big enough offer, they should part ways with them, because I think they could invest that money in a better player for the future. I think Pogba...
Sean Longstaff.
I'm not going to commit. I've only seen Sean Longstaff play once, and that was at St James's Park
against
Man City win.
Man City.
Yeah.
Right, and he absolutely mugged Fernandinho off.
Yes, he was very, very good.
Yeah, he did.
But yeah, I just think that maybe there was that pre-season video that they had where he was fighting Lingard, or like getting into an argument with Lingard.
I don't want to say that was blown out of proportion because we literally did a news story on it, but you know what I mean.
Is there any point in keeping a player around who isn't happy? You know,
well, this is what I'm going to say, because there's two schools of thought with having Pogba at Man United. Take away what he brings to you on the pitch.
No,
having a player like him in that squad is a statement of intent. However, a bit like you're mentioning there, he can also sort of poison the water hole and potentially influence younger players.
Like, because you always hear this stuff about attitude this, attitude that. You know, gets het up. You know, he's a bad influence around training. Is he?
I don't think it's necessarily the influence around players. I just think it's the attitude he exudes on the pitch. He just doesn't look arsed. And like, I don't want to go full Souness or anything, but it is apparent.
I honestly don't see that.
Right, I do personally. I've a bit of an impasse now.
I don't like. I get. You know, he thinks he's a superstar. Or he does his hair.
Oh,
and all
not
this.
That.
But, no, but like it's all part of the same company.
Yeah.
Oh, don't like his attitude. Blah blah blah. Like I watched a fair bit of Man United last year. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you could do a little bit more going the other way, but it's Paul Pogba. Surely you can build a side around the fact that you shouldn't be the one having to make 40-yard lung busting runs to put in last ditch tackles.
It's also the fact that you may feel frustrated at the lack of support he gets around that team.
I
will
say that run they went on after Solskjaer took over clearly he didn't get on with Mourinho. Which, and again, you might point at that and say that's an example of having a bad attitude. But when he was well used in the side and everybody was sort of pulling in the right direction and you know they were getting the most out of him. He was the best centre midfielder in the league for about a month or two last season. I think, don't get me wrong, every player's got their price. If somebody drops in with silly money and the player wants to go, absolutely let him go. But
and then you could get in was it Milinkovic-Savic?
Possibly, yeah. But I think it comes down to him. If he wants to stay, then let him stay and use him properly.
But that's the interesting thing around Paul Pogba's move as well, was that necessarily Paul Pogba, the brand they were bringing in, or Paul Pogba, the player, you know, because you got the whole, the sponsorship deals, you have that to, you know, there's invariably going to be press, you know, signing, what at the time was the world's most expensive footballer. Has Man United, the project, moved on from Paul Pogba, the brand, and can Paul Pogba, the footballer, have a role in that? You know what I mean? It's yeah, I would, if I were in their position, I think they just need more guile in midfield.
I think if they really have aspirations of getting in the top four, they can't sell their best player.
How important a season is this for Marcus Rashford?
Well, when you're at that age and you're at that sort of stage of your career, every season you have is the most important season of your career. Again, he was another one who looked exceptional in the second half of that season, and he's an undeniably incredibly talented footballer. It just depends if Lukaku goes, what they want out of him, because if they want him to suddenly step up out of nowhere and be a 25, 30 goal a season striker, it's going to be a lot of work for him. You know, they have to play a very certain way to get that out of him.
Well, I was about to say, in pre-season, I think they've had Martial playing the striker role, and you've had your Rashford and your James on either side. So I don't know that's the thing. I don't know what his favourite position is. No. Is it a left winger? Is it a striker? Is it a right winger? I honestly don't know. He gets played all over the pitch. I think he needs to find a position and just settle.
It's one of those where when he first broke through, you thought you need to leave Man United because you'll not get the game time to really develop. But he did get the game time, and he did develop into a world-class footballer. But now it's almost at the stage where it's like, yeah, right, you've got the pitch time, you've got the minutes, you've clearly got the ability, you maybe need to go and be a more important part of a slightly smaller squad. Maybe. Even if it's just for a year or something, but I don't know, a player of his calibre who's that important to the side you can just get away with loaning out. It's going to be a big player for them this year. Yeah. Again, it depends. If Lukaku goes and they don't bring anybody in to replace him, it's a lot. All the burden of goals falls on him and Martial, who, you know, are not what you call prolific.
No, you need a Lingard to chip in with another few goals as well in there as well. Can they win a trophy?
Yeah, of course can.
Yeah.
They're more than good enough to win a cup. More than good enough.
I could definitely see him getting the Carabao Cup, maybe. Yeah, they have more than enough potential to go on a cup run. Like
they're good. Pretty much every side at the top of that league can just about beat anybody on. You know, wouldn't be the biggest upset in the world to see Man United beating City in a cup, in a cup game. You know what I mean? Because these things do happen.
Raise your game for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think they're probably one of the favourites for the FA Cup because they'll certainly be taking it a lot more seriously than sides who've got other slightly bigger responsibilities. Have they got the depth to really get through that? It depends. I think if it starts getting to the latter stages of certain cup competitions and they are 4th/5th, pointing it here and there, it's changing every week, wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe take their foot off the gas. But, you know, that they've got a better side now than the one that won the Europa League a few years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Right now we've buttered them up. We'll take to the opposite side. What is the worst case scenario for Man United this season?
No, outside top 6 finish. I think top 4. Like if they don't get in the top 4, that is a worst.
This is the thing.
Scenario.
I could see them honestly doing well enough to get third. But I could also see them doing bad enough to get seventh.
I don't see who they displace to get into the top 4. I know Chelsea have a very, very pivotal year ahead of them as well, but they still have their squad, I would say, is better than...
The thing about Chelsea, though, is when they drop off, they drop off.
Yes. So did United. United last year, they completely dropped off. Again, I think it's between... If you look at the top 4, we think, City and Liverpool probably guaranteed to get, first and second.
I think you'd have to be...
in that order? Or?
Spurs... Again, I think are very, very likely to get top 4 as well. I don't see Arsenal being in a position to get there, but maybe they do have a more cohesive project right now.
Every year we always look at Arsenal and go, maybe it's their year this year. We'll do an Arsenal preview at some point.
Arsenal and Man United are in very similar positions, which is very curious. I don't think I would have said that in a long time, but it is the case, and
I've got to say, the last time Arsenal and Man United looked this close to each other, they were the best 2 teams in the country.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
They've not looked like this. I think there's a genuine natural rivalry there for who can just about salvage 4th. I do think Chelsea will drop right off this year. I think
Who scores their goals?
I don't think you can underestimate how much they're going to miss Hazard.
It's one of the things where I'm really curious to see how they do. I would put them because I have no idea. There's no way predicting. They've not
Chelsea last year honestly reminded me so much of sort of latter-day Robson, Souness, Roda era Newcastle with Hazard. Just because the thing was, we had a really ropey squad full of a few good players, but by and large a lot of absolute lubs in it who couldn't really be bothered. But we still had Shearer, and by and large he would just drag you to results, and he wouldn't let anybody else really down tools. And watching Hazard last year, so many times he's like, well, I'm just gonna have to get a point out of this, aren't I, for us? I'm just gonna have to win this, I guess.
Give me the ball, lads.
And he would just go on and do it. And I think without them, they could fall. They're in serious danger of falling way off. Way off.
I cannot wait to talk more about Chelsea. But let us know your thoughts on Manchester United in the comment section.
I didn't finish yet. What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Not in terms of what happens on the pitch, what happens with the club as a whole. Because I think if it's really bad, if the results are really bad and they sort of start to turn on a club legend like that, and he goes that soon into this project of buying these younger players with these aspirations, they're not delivering on the pitch, I think the whole thing could turn.
Yeah.
Personally, I think they will get 4th. I think there's enough in there for them to potentially get it.
That's a reminder. We need to do it. We need to sit down
and
do
a prediction. I do think they might just do it. I think there's enough goodwill in the club, and I think with the kind of players they're buying and the manager they've got, you can see the fans sticking with them through the sticky periods and stuff, and that might just get them through. But it could potentially go really badly wrong.
It's going to be fascinating this season. You let us know your thoughts in the comment section below or on Twitter at WhatCultureFC. Watch there. Follow all 3 of us. You can follow Ewan at
Ewan Ruins Things.
You can follow Clery at
Adam Clery, Clery.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. I said you can follow us all at WhatCultureFC, and make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily football podcasts. My thanks to Adam and to Ewan. Thank you for watching or listening, and we will see you soon.